I head up an organization called the Global Futures and Foresight, which is exactly what it does. It sort of helps organizations think more about what's coming and what's next and how to change. So that's where we're going. But what I love is things, quotations, and I'll probably use a few. And this one's from Kennedy. He says, basically, there's change all around us. And if you only look at the present and the past, which is what a lot of people do, looking at their quarters, months, performance, and what we're doing now, and the pressures and the expediency, the important things we need to embrace. But occasionally we need to look forward. We need to look at the future about what's coming. And that's what we're going to spend a bit of time doing. I mean, you could argue that the amount of change is enormous and it feels like it's accelerating, but it broadly breaks down into how the world's working and how it operates is changing. Demography, who we are and where we are and how old we are and what we think about is changing. Tech in every aspect. The nature of work and who is working and how we're working is changing a great deal, isn't it? And then, of course, energy, technology, transport, consumption, what we want to buy. Do we want to buy things in the same old way? We're changing our minds about that. And, of course, then there's the environment and everything to do with that. So there's a massive wave of things that are all shifting at the same time. That make sense? Yeah. So you like change, yeah? Love it. Yeah, hurrah! Okay, maybe later. All right, look, first things first, we're not always brilliant at it. Look at this, Dulles, who said this years ago when Japan started in the car industry, they will never become much of importance to us, and therefore we'll give them most favored nation. Brilliant. 40% of the US market is now Japanese. So that didn't work out too well. Thinking about this, a German businessman was thinking that, okay, a professor, when women go to work at the beginning of the First World War, they will look like us. They will be bald and wear beards. Well, the good news was it didn't turn out like that, thank goodness, so that changed. And finally, Marshal Foch, who was in charge of the First World War for quite a while, on our side at least, he said that aeroplanes won't amount to anything. This is the FE-2B that was pretty useless, quite frankly, and now we spend all our money on F-35 fighters, and what money we have left over, we put them on ships to move them around the world. So it's turned out to be stunningly important. So we're brilliant at getting it wrong. Harry Warner said this, look, his words, Howard wants to hear actors talk in 1927. And that was the year that the talkie came out, the jazz singer, the first one, and all the films being made that year had to be redubbed with voice. And they discovered a lot of actors couldn't speak well or at all, and therefore they had to be changed. So a big deal happened, a big change. But he couldn't see why anyone would want to hear a talking movie. So he got that wrong. So what I love is John Maynard Keynes said this, that better to be roughly right than precisely wrong. In fact, every organization needs this phrase put up somewhere in the building, somewhere in the office, somewhere in their virtual world. Better to be roughly right than precisely wrong. Because we tend to look at things going forward exactly. So, I don't know if you've got 3-year plans, but it's probably got exact numbers in it. But it won't work out that way, I can tell you, and you know that as well. But we still produce plans with not a range of numbers. It'll be somewhere between this and this. We don't do that. We have one view of the numbers for next year, for this year, for next year, year after that. We'll just have specific numbers. And it isn't the way the world works. We need to think differently how we divide things up. Look, moving on, has it always been like that? Well, Queen Elizabeth I, when the stocking making machine came out, she said, there's no way I'm going to give that a patent because it will make my citizens beggars. Her son, James I, this is about 1580, said, I'm not going to do it either because it would make beggars of my subjects. And guess what? With ChatGPT, now we're hearing people saying we will make beggars of people because they will no longer be able to make a living. So the same thing happens every time we have a new impactful technology in any area. It displaces a lot of people's living, and then we have to move on. So bad luck, we are. So this is the one time, it's quite an exciting time, the people who've invested most in their futures, professional people, thought leaders, knowledge workers, are the ones being automated. So it's the worst thing going to ever happen. Yeah? We have to live through it. We've lived through clerical change, we've lived through manual work change, we need to live through this change, and this one's going to be a real humdinger, I can tell you. So we're on the way through that at the moment, and it's surprising many people. Are you all right still? Good, moving on. Looking at the past was not a particularly useful way of looking at the future, and looking at digital is not really now any good looking at the future either. So digital took many people by storm. It's a whole way of thinking about new technology, but actually it's about mobility, it's about digital products and services, digital lifestyles. It's not about just the technology. And now we're moving forward and into the intelligent era. So we're animating digital assets. So if you haven't already got digital everything, and that can be everything from working practices to contracts to engagement to products to services to staff even. I don't mean machines, by the way. We're now going to automate all of that landscape we've created already. So it's going to be virtual, i.e. online somewhere. It's going to be quantified. It's going to be automated and smart because it is much more predictive than it is about what we're doing now. It's about what's coming next. And we will increasingly want to be in that world, massively networked, a bit like us today here, and everything hyper-personalized. So the mass market of much is going to be changed from our ability to personalize and hyper-personalize things that we do. And I'll talk a bit more about that. This frightening slide is all the technologies that are happening at once. And many of these things you know about. You know about platforms and ecosystems where we're no longer in linear supply chains. We're in eco-markets, we're in ecosystems where we're a player and take different roles in those markets. Of course, cloud computing, we've shifted everything from the office to online somewhere. Data analytics and data twins, I'm going to cover to a degree later. But we've got things like quantum happening this year for the first time. How many of you are engaged in quantum computing? Who's ever heard of quantum computing? Yeah, of course. It's very quick. That's really all you need to know. So it's very quick, it's coming soon, it'll coming through the cloud, you don't know anything about it, and what are you going to do when it's 1,000 times quicker than your current technology? What would you do if your tech could run 1,000 times faster? And that's the sort of issue to discuss, and we'll talk about some of these things as we go along, but of course everything has to be sustainable and environmentally friendly and appropriate to meet our own goals and our company's brand values. But what's really cool is that around us there are venture capitalist companies and investment firms funding hundreds of thousands of startups in many sectors using smart technology invariably, of course AI, I'm bound to mention it, but in various fields like virtual reality, about health, artificial intelligence, so not just the product of the line of thinking, the capability, but also various segments are being transformed by new startups. And the good news about startups is they don't all need to survive. You only need one to survive, and that's the truth of it. Most of our markets, 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 survive to create some sort of competition in a market, and the others fall by the wayside. And that's where we are with an awful lot of these new areas, with hundreds of billions of dollars being spent on these firms. So they will succeed, and they will change everything we do. Satellites, we've currently got about 4,000 satellites in space, which is quite impressive, and we'll have 100,000 satellites within a decade. Discuss. What difference does it make when everyone doesn't need to be near a cell phone mast or have a cable up the street? They're all going to be hyper-fast versions of satellite communication. So anywhere, anybody, everywhere, online, as fast as you want to be. What would you do differently? And that's the question really every time. So, all right, that's interesting. 5G. Who's got a specific product in 5G? Brilliant. Okay, 6G is coming. So by 2026, in South Korea, they plan to have multiple pilots, and they'll roll out in 2028. So already the next and probably the most technology capable society, which is South Korea, is planning 6G, which can be in the lab at least 1,000 times faster. And the latency, the ability to connect, is massively quicker and more reliable. What do you do when your pacemaker can be online reliably all the time? Are we going to run our pacemaker from satellite and from systems remotely, or is it going to be built in as it is today? So are we going to do things differently? And the truth is we are. And it takes us a long time, by the way. It took us a long time to work out that 5G wasn't just a faster version than 4G. So many people were struggling over that one. That's another technology. So the other thing is Internet of Things, so devices, cameras, measuring tools, of one sort or another. We'll get to about 1 trillion in the next few years, let's say this decade. We'll get to about 1 trillion devices. So the quantified era, nothing will be guesstimated anymore. Everything will have a sensor on it of some sort telling you its state. And what do you do when everything around you has got a state of condition? Do you then estimate the condition of things, or do you know the condition of things? And that's what's changing dramatically. I love the comment that Gartner made, going back to 2020s. Within 2 to 5 years, it will be transformative. It will change how we operate, how we work. So quietly during the pandemic, we've been gradually rolling out all of these cameras and devices and means of analyzing these tools and being able to do things differently. And the trick is that, are we doing anything different as a consequence of all that ability to measure things, including us, by the way? We're quite measurable. Thinking about it further, how we feel, what our emotions are, what our behaviors are increasingly becoming more intensely analyzed and available online, and therefore you can interrogate that data to know really how we're likely to respond, not just to your proposition and your proposals, but also maybe how your staff are feeling. Is it time for them to take a walk, take a break, take a sabbatical? Is it time for them to stop being put under the pressure that you put them under? Is it time for you to think about the costs of damaging people? Because the government they're thinking about how can you be responsible for the damage you've caused to your employees rather than throwing them onto the National Health Service or private health. So there's some real conversations going on about how do you stop damaging humans? And this is one of the ways you can do it, by sensing how well people are reacting in the workplace and the work environment. So that's changing. And of course, how we respond is much more now positively understood by being able to scan people's faces. Do you do that when people are looking at you on Zoom? Are you interrogating the response? Yeah, it's a tricky one, isn't it? Because, are you entitled to do that? Have you got permission to do that? So it's a double-edged sword. We need the permission. And by the way, this is why brands are important. If I've got a trusted brand, I would trust you to use it well. If you've got a brand I don't trust, you're not going to get access. There is no way in the world that I want you to know how I'm feeling about anything. And that applies to your staff as well. Moving on, artificial intelligence, got to talk about it. Sorry about that. But we're at the point where there are many forms of technology, and AI in particular, we've already adapted to some degree. Robotic process automation being one of them. You're probably all using that, yeah? RPA? Show of hands. Who's using RPA? There's about 5 people in the room. Grab them at coffee, find out what that is. That's quite useful. So doing things in a way that is oh, well, forget it. Ask them. Look, moving on, we've got more ways of change. We love generative AI. My last son, fourth son, got a degree, and he got a first. But I thought, why has Barney got a first? He's not like that ever in his career. He's one of my sons who just was bone idle. So I thought he would scrape through, but not get a first. He got it from Oxford Brookes. And he then told me he discovered generative AI quite early on. So I don't think the examiners quite got up to speed with what it was by the time he was using it, to be honest with you. So I think that was imaginative and creative of him, but that's probably where that's got to. Gen AI is taking organizations by storm because it appears to be very clever. It's not actually very clever. It's brilliant implementation on the analysis of data in an incredibly quick and creative way. But fortunately, it isn't like the next wave, which is even more interesting, artificial general intelligence, which is the one that we ought to worry about if you really want to worry about things. Right now with Gen AI, it pretty much follows whatever you ask it, so the interrogation is in your control to some degree, even though it comes up with great answers. Artificial general intelligence, you might give it a goal, but it will choose how to achieve it. So if it decides that you're not necessary to achieve that goal, then you may not be around to do it. If your company is not necessary to do that goal, another one is, or outsource everything, that's what it would probably suggest or do. So artificial general intelligence is really interesting. I'm quite looking forward to that. The good news is there's probably still at least a decade and a half of ways. So you've got time to think about that one. The good news is that generative AI has sort of doubled the digital economy. So it's a massive growth in capability of what we're doing. And there are some in the room I know who are already camping on this, hopefully making a lot of money out of it, quite frankly. So Gen AI is a cool tool for anything that's codifiable. So if you're in accounting, if you're in banking, if you're in insurance, if you are in law, if you have many people who do the junior roles there and make a lot of money from it, that can be completely replaced with Gen AI, because it's brilliant at following rules and coming up with the most incredible detail to deliver it. So very good, and also art and other things. So the good news is that we've probably got very little time to adapt to this. We had 150 years for the last revolution. We've probably got 15 years for this one. So if you like change, you're in the right place. Yeah? All massively deflated now. There's all too much, isn't it? I know. Okay, another big slide. Don't have to read it, not the point. These are all generative AI firms. So most of them know about a few of them, 2 or 3 of them, but you don't know there are hundreds of Gen AI firms who are doing very specific things for different industries, sectors, and ways and behaviors. What's dead cool, if you look right down the bottom here, you've got OpenAI, which is where ChatGPT came from, and GPT-4 as it now is. So the ones that we know of are down here, the general ones, but over here, in every world, whether it's health or other worlds, you've got AI that's been adapted for those particular worlds. And some firms are using Gen AI on their own data, and then using that as part of their processes. So it's really getting quite a foothold. It's quite cool. But there are many things. You know, the Khan Academy, which is the online academy for the world, if you like, that's increasingly using AI teachers to teach the content that they've created. So that's altered that. You've got people like, you know, I'll give an example here. You know, teachers in marking homework are using Class Companion. Architects are using Design Pro. Everyone's using different tools to do different things, but we're all using generative AI. And what's really cool is that the amount of data we've collected at the moment is vast. I mean, there's no point going into it, but we're talking zettabytes. Does anyone know what a zettabyte is? Anyone care what a zettabyte is? No, not much. It's a lot. It's 1 to the power of 27, lots of noughts. Lots of data. It took us a long time to get the first one. We've now got 75 of them, and the first one was 2015, so we've got massive amounts of data. But that's nothing compared to what AI will generate in new data. Nothing. So we can have thousands of zettabytes in the future. I won't bore you with what that's called, but there are lots of new forms of data that will only be created because we're using AI to generate it. No longer human activity. Vast amounts of money is going to be generated by AI. I think I talked in terms of about 15 trillion of new activity. So if you are in any way thinking about how you can use these tools, then it's a great thing to do. And if you can get in there relatively quickly, it's a good thing again to do. Not at the bleeding edge, but one of the leading edge in your sector, and to show your competence at being able to handle the consequences of AI, even in your recruitment. You know, even in your internal processes, using AI to predict what sort of skills and people you need. Many firms are already thinking in those terms. They're already doing that, quite frankly. Also, you've got machines that are now using AI to combine automated machinery. I was on a platform with this, I'd better call her a lady, but that'd be wrong, wouldn't it? Machine in Bahrain a few years ago, and she was very brilliant. The AI engine that was in her, that was driving the responses, and physically her movement and response to it was actually quite impressive, very impressive. But you also got things like a lot of medics in the States in particular are saying that that's all very well and good, and will use algorithms to determine your likelihood for disease rather than blood samples and other bodily fluid samples to determine how well you are in scanning. We will be able to use algorithms increasingly to tell how well you are and the likelihood of you becoming unwell in certain ways. And a lot of medics are saying, and I'm not going to use that, I'm not going to tell people that. The liability of using that data is too much. So we've got a real clash of regulation and new capability that needs to be resolved before we can really roll it out. And that about sums up everything, by the way. You know, the clash of regulation and capability just rolls on as ever. Another technology is in the virtuality of the engagement online is things like augmented reality. These glasses came out a while ago, £1,400 or thereabouts. They were priced at the wrong point in the market. People were worried about them. Folk who wore them glass holes because you couldn't tell if they were filming you or had other information about you. So it died a death, but it hasn't gone away. It's still being used in many sectors. But they're cool, these tools, and virtual reality, augmented reality, extended reality, all have a specific place in our teaching, our training, our development, and our employment of people to do jobs. Because extended reality, you overlay the physical world with the virtual world interactively. So that's the bit that's different. So because of what's happening in the virtual world, we interact with it online. And what's happening in the real world, we change the virtual world. And that's quite cool. Or, for travel, for example, we feel we've been somewhere. So it's either the greatest boom in wanting to travel there, or it's the worst thing happening because I feel I've already been there. So which one is it? Where am I going to play with things like that? So it's simple questions. Equally, we're going to overlay the world with augmented reality data, as I'm sure you do all the time, with whatever you do in your world. You have more data coming at you all the time to inform your judgment and decision. We don't need screens anymore. Don't need screens, do you? Yeah, screens have gone, finished. No screens in the office, they've gone. So we use virtual engagement in ways now anywhere to have exactly the same setup we might have in the office or at home. We can have it on the move instantly, anytime, which is pretty cool. Architects are using it to help people walk through buildings and to create, even in British Airways, in fact it was BAA, they created their signposting for the 5th terminal at Heathrow, and then they got short of money, so they didn't put it up. But otherwise, they got quite good at using virtual reality, augmented reality to walk through and know what the experience would be for people beforehand. And by the way, people go for walks together now in virtual worlds. You probably do that with your clients, yeah? Not that likely, is it? But there you go. And people are, and they're building relationship as a consequence. And the younger you are, the more you get it. Because this is one of those younger things. Because I was brought up on digital, and therefore it's no big deal, the fact you're throwing another digital at me. So it's also things like people in banking environments, investment environments, where I need 8 screens to be able to run my world. I don't need screens anymore. I can just have that in a virtual world in a headset. Or doctors, I can look at your renal system and see what's wrong, your specific system, and watch how it's working virtually rather than having static images of what your body functions are, if you forgive me. But most people who've been in virtual worlds have also bought online. They've also been buying. They're not just using it as tools to operate, they're using it to buy stuff. So why not? So probably putting your world up into a virtual engaging space is allowing people to engage with whatever it is you sell or market. So there's no reason why we shouldn't be doing that. Or we have meetings with holograms. And of course, ABBA with Voyager being the most successful non-physically present Voyage music concert around the world ever. And this was forecast years ago. You know, they make no money out of their records, to use that old name, but they make it all out of presents. So when you go to a concert, you buy the T-shirt, you buy the food, you buy everything, you buy the ticket. And of course, what they've done with virtuality is be in many places at the same time, gaining all of that side product benefit. So a brilliant idea. So what are you doing virtually that allows you to be in 5 places at once? Where are you as well as being here this morning? Could be somewhere else. Not suggesting you should be, by the way. Far from it. Or we're using interactive 3D virtuality, or we're doing crazy things with marketing because we can do these things and interact with people. Equally with 3D printing. Who are you in additive manufacturing? Are many people here in manufacturing? Do you use additive manufacturing? Okay, well 3D printing is otherwise known as, you can make anything. Out of glass, stone, plastic, metal, bodily fluids, you can make anything out of 3D printing. There's 1,000 parts on the Airbus A350 are 3D printed. Most engines in Formula One are 3D printed because the gas flows are smoother with 3D printing. So most things that you don't know about are probably being influenced to some degree by 3D printing. You probably, if you've got a young person in your house, buy them a 3D printer and see what they make. You'll be amazed what they can do. Equally, these are a few examples, whether it's prosthetics, whether it's finished products, but the key thing here is they're finished products. These aren't prototyping tools, which is where it all came from. These are finished products, including hearts and food and a car. You made this Lamborghini, or maybe photography dies now and we have statues instead. So maybe we're looking at a change of the way we see things from 2D to 3D because we can print them, because we can make them. Or we do things like, as I say, we manufacture hearts. And the first person to start producing new organs from your own biomass to reduce the risk of rejection is the same person who built the first organ replacement using wax frameworks. And all he's saying is this is just a different way of creating new organs. So you can damage your organs to pieces, you just have another one. So replacing them is a bit of an issue still, but the good news is you can mostly print new versions of your body. That should be good news. You can abuse your liver all you like now, you heard it here, and you get a new one. All right, they're not quite available like that, but you get the idea. Equally, if you did print a 3D heart, for example, would people let their children have these implanted? And in a study recently, half the people in Britain, in America, and 60% in Britain said, if it was necessary, I would have a 3D printed heart put in my child. It's that degree of trust you can imbue in people. So why would you not use it? Equally, on a bigger scale, maybe you have 3D printed buildings. How many of you live in a 3D printed house? Now, Britain's unique, actually. It's the only country in the world that doesn't have 3D printed houses, because we've got building regs. And these things have twice the crush strength, they're quicker to build, they're crushable, they're sustainable, you can use waste material to build them, and you can build amazing structures like this one in Dubai that took 4 people a week to build. 6,700 square feet, and it's now their municipality building on 2 floors. Or you can go to China, and they've been doing this for about a decade now. They built 10 houses in 1 day. So we're still putting people in tents in refugee villages. Why? That's silly. Why don't we build them in houses that can take you a few hours to build, and then you crush them up afterwards and you take and repaste it somewhere else? So the dead cool thing is you've got new ways of doing things that, as I mentioned before, regulation gets in the way. It stops us doing it in Britain. By the way, it's big in Germany, it's big elsewhere, it's big in the States. So we've got challenges there. Moving very rapidly on. Are you all right still? I'll finish very soon. Promise you've got to remember some of this stuff. You've got to think of what matters to me, what around your table, what matters to me, how might I do something about it. Human augmentation, you've seen on the news, occasionally Britain does put it on the news. You know, we are increasingly able to operate physical devices from the way we think, our muscles move, our brains work. And brain-computer interfaces is one of the biggest things coming, and that will allow us to think things and run technology to operate differently and make up for whatever's missing in our bodies. But it also makes us 10 times stronger to work in a warehouse. It makes us run quicker. There's all sorts of ethical issues about, should I chop my legs off and have artificial ones put on and win the races? And believe it or not, people are talking about how do we deal with that issue? Where do we stand on regulation? As I say, brain-computer interfaces, whatever you think can drive technology, so be careful what you think. And you have to be a bit more disciplined about what you think to drive these technologies. So that's also coming. And it's being used in the military a great deal, I might add. It's been used by fast jet pilots for a long time, and it's increasingly used by on-the-ground troops for a bunch of different reasons. Or we get to the point where we don't need humans at all. Sorry about that. We go out to pasture, we get paid for by all the machines. And by the way, in America, 2010, the generation of wealth in the country and the payment of salaries diverged for the first time in their history, because machines and capital were making the money and giving it to people, not people earning income from doing the work. So it's beginning to happen. You can see, you know, airline pilots, for example, you could save $35 billion a year if you got rid of airline pilots. How many people would be happy going on a plane knowing there were no pilots? Show of hands, how many people are happy? I think it's a brilliant idea. I've got a plane, nobody in the cockpit. Oh, okay. Or, given there are some airlines now, when they start, you are not allowed as a pilot to touch the controls after 3,000 feet. They let you land occasionally, because one day you might have to, but they don't want you to take off, they don't want you to land, and they don't want you to touch the controls, because you're the unreliable factor in the whole mix. Everything's pretty much automated anyway, to some degree. And when things go wrong, do you want 2 stressed pilots at the front trying to work out what's gone wrong? Or do you want a room full of 40 people who are experts in their little bit of how a plane works, trying to work out what's gone wrong, connecting with it real time through 100 satellites or 1,000 satellites or whatever? What do you think? Which way would you like it? I mean, I'm going for the second one, actually. I'm sorry about that. So I'll have the blow-up pilots at the front, if you like, and have something that looks real, but I'll have real people on the ground worrying about every detail of my flight when I press the panic button. So, change in thinking. So, robotics, where are we? This is Boston Dynamics. This is a device, it's a couple of years old now, actually, Atlas, and it's completely self-contained. There's no wires running to it. It can jump, walk, run faster than you can run, carry more than you can carry, build bricks on walls quicker than you can build bricks on walls. It can do an awful lot of things cleverer than we can, and you can basically make it adapt to do anything. It's just showing the first humanoid-shaped type of person or robot we can have in our system. So add that with AI, or we could have, for example, holograms. So you can have holograms who are working for you. Have you got holograms working for you? Out there doing stuff? They're a lot easier to manage. You just turn them off when they're trouble. So holograms, or you can have robots. How many of you got humanoid robots? This one's for sale, by the way, $250,000, or you can hire her. And she walks, talks, chats, does all the stuff you would imagine. Or you could add celebrity, this is Shakira, or you could add Clooney. So you can add the world of celebrity on top of your robot to do things at exhibitions and conferences. And by the way, it's been proven that when people feel they're talking to a celebrity, they open up more. And they say more, probably more than they should say. So I'm not sure it's a good thing or not, but it's an interesting scenario to think about. Or we have digital twins, so everything about us has been digitized. So the vaccine is a digital version of it, put in your digital body to see how it reacts. And the speed at which I can create remedies and personalize them to you is growing exponentially. So increasingly, medicine will be personalized. We're near in the end. You okay? The good news is we need to think about what this stuff allows us to do and think about our work, where we're going to. So the question for you is, what out of all of those, or anything else you happen to have been thinking about while I was talking, or other you brought in the room, it doesn't have to be limited to that. What's going on? What might have the biggest impact? And I think, Chester, you want to come and talk to